My name is Emma. I'm 25 years old and single. I don't have a full-time job and have mostly stayed at home since middle school. I did go to high school, but I dropped out, so my education only goes up to middle school. Since then, I've been living with my parents and working part-time jobs. I also take on different online work that I find. I have an older brother named Maya. He's 3 years older than me and is completely different from me. He's really good at sports, has lots of friends, and is what people call outgoing. Maya didn't want anyone to know he had a sister like me. He never brought his friends home, and if I ran into him and his friends at a convenience store, he would ignore me. I thought it was just something I had to accept and didn't think too much about it. When Maya started college and moved out to live on his own, I stopped worrying about these things. Then, there was talk about him getting married. He was turning 28, so it wasn't surprising. Eventually, it was decided that Maya would bring his fiancée to our parents' house. Since I was home that day, I decided to join them. When Maya arrived and saw me sitting with our parents, he looked a bit confused. His fiancée came in right after, and she seemed unaware of how Maya felt. When she looked at me, she seemed puzzled, like she was wondering who I was. It was clear she didn't know about me, and Maya probably hadn't told her about his sister. My mother introduced herself and my father, but she didn't mention me. The fiancée, Maya, seemed satisfied with the introductions, but she still looked a bit confused. My parents didn't do much to explain who I was. They had always been tough on me, especially because I didn't live up to Maya's achievements. When we were younger, they would often compare me to him, saying things like, "Your brother can do it, so why can't you?" It felt like part of their way of educating me. As we grew older, things didn't get better. Eventually, they even called me a money-sucking leech. It seemed like they were planning to ignore me during this meeting too. As my mother stood up to get more drinks, she whispered in my ear, "Why are you here? Go back to your room." I had come to this meeting hoping to connect with my family in my own way, but it seemed like it wasn't working out. Still, I didn't want to leave, so I stayed. Maya's fiancée introduced herself as Maya. She was 25, just like me, but she looked elegant and sophisticated, making me feel like I shouldn't talk to her casually. Maya seemed a bit annoyed, probably because he didn't like that I was there. He introduced Maya to our parents, but didn't acknowledge me at all, making me feel invisible. When the talk about the marriage was over, the conversation shifted to casual topics. Even then, Maya acted like I wasn't there. Eventually, he asked me, "So, Emma, what do you usually do?" I was about to answer my brother when he interrupted. "Wait, Maya, you don't need to talk to her," he said clearly. Maya looked a bit surprised by his words. "That's right, don't worry about it," my mother chimed in. "She's just a stranger with a blood relation," she added. Hearing that, I felt something inside me break. A stranger, huh? I thought. It was clear that reconciliation was impossible from the start. The meeting ended as if my presence didn't matter at all. Soon after, my brother and Maya got married and started building a house to live in together. My brother works at a well-known company, and despite still being in his 20s, he seems to have a good income. Maya decided to be a stay-at-home wife and had already quit her job. When their new house was finished, we received an invitation to their housewarming party. The party was going to be small, with only a few guests including Maya's relatives and my brother's bosses. My mother was anxious about it, saying, "Oh, it's already done. Time flies. We need to get a housewarming gift. What should we buy?" My father responded, "We're family, so it doesn't have to be anything fancy," and then casually handed over the invitation. When I looked at the invitation, I noticed that only my parents' names were listed. My name wasn't on it. My mother seemed to notice this too and asked, "Emma is coming too, right?" I was puzzled by her question. They had introduced me so poorly at the meeting, it was fine if I wasn't invited. I declined, but my mother insisted, "No, you're coming. I'll make arrangements." So, despite my reluctance, I ended up going to the party. On the day of the party, it suddenly started raining. My parents and I took a taxi to my brother's house. Because of the rain, my brother and Maya didn't come out to the front yard but waited at the entrance to welcome their guests. When we arrived, my mother told me, "You pay for the taxi," and got out of the car with my father first. Without umbrellas, they hurried toward the entrance. I thought it was a bit extravagant to take a taxi, especially since there was quite a distance between my brother's house and ours. As I paid for the taxi, I ran towards the entrance. When I reached the entrance, Maya looked at me and asked, "Who are you?" I had only met Maya once before, so I figured maybe she'd forgotten me. I introduced myself, saying, "I'm Emma, Maya's sister." But she smiled and said, the high school dropout. We didn't invite the parasite living off a parent." She said this with a casual smile, as if it were just a normal comment. Maya, who had just come back from showing someone inside, walked out and looked at me with disdain. He said, "Huh, why are you here?" Then he told Maya, "Hey, I told you not to invite her. Why is she here?" My brother clearly didn't want me there, and Maya's attitude changed as soon as she knew who I was. In fact, she was even worse than my brother and parents. I hesitated and asked my brother cautiously, "Would it have been better if I didn't come?" He responded coldly, "Yeah, you're a stranger because of your low education. Not finishing high school doesn't count as an education, right?" He then added, "Could you please leave the property quickly?" Maya, maintaining her calm demeanor, supported him and echoed his sentiment. Her expression was chilling. I understood and turned to leave. The taxi I had taken earlier was gone, and since we weren't on a main street, finding another one was difficult. Without an umbrella, I walked through the rain, getting completely drenched. I could hear Maya's laughter behind me as I walked away. When I finally got home, my parents came back looking like they had enjoyed themselves. They saw my wet and miserable face and asked, "Why did you leave so suddenly? Couldn't even call a taxi for the way back. You're so useless." My mother complained as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I lied and said, "Sorry, I suddenly had a stomach ache." My mother scolded me, "You left for that reason? You're hopeless. Make sure to give the gift later. You're an adult." My father added, "Speaking of which, you were supposed to bring a gift, but you brought it back with you." I had prepared a gift for the party, but I didn't get a chance to give it. I wanted to send it by mail, but I didn't know their address. I could have asked my parents, but the atmosphere was too awkward. So, I decided to contact my brother directly. I sent him a message. "I want to send a gift. Can you tell me the address?" The only reply I got from him was, "I don't give my address to strangers." I sighed in frustration. It seemed like they enjoyed making me feel inferior and embarrassed, not just in public, but also in private. I couldn't help but wonder if Maya was also involved in these messages, laughing at my situation. It was all just ridiculous. I decided to give up on sending a congratulatory gift. I realized I couldn't get along with my family anymore and decided it was best to live on my own. Although I didn't have a full-time job, I had some savings from my part-time work. With that, I was able to rent a small room for myself. Since I didn't have much money to live on, I decided to try streaming videos in my spare time. I was already interested in watching streams as a hobby and was good at spotting trends among popular streamers and finding ways to increase views. So, when I started streaming myself, I hoped it might help me get by. I started making tens of thousands a month from my streaming and investments. The amount of money I earned was more than enough to cover my living expenses, so I decided to invest the extra funds. The investments went well, and I eventually started a small company that imported and sold goods. I was busy in a fulfilling way and enjoyed my work every day. I didn't have to worry about a family complaining about me using the computer all the time. A few months later, I received a call from my parents, who hadn't been in touch since I moved out. They asked if I could help Maya financially. I was curious and asked why. I wondered what could have happened to him since he had just built a new house. My parents began to explain the situation. It turned out that my brother had been hosting frequent parties in his new home, mingling with bosses, executives, clients, and Maya's acquaintances. At one of these parties, someone proposed an investment opportunity, and my brother decided to trust this proposal. He ended up losing a large sum of money, lured by the promise of high returns in just a few months. I was shocked. My brother had a decent job, and if he had just continued working hard, he wouldn't have made such a mistake. I asked who had recommended the investment, thinking it might have been a scam. My parents reassured me that it wasn't a scam, but rather one of Maya's acquaintances who had made the proposal. It seemed they trusted Maya completely. When I asked how much money they needed, my parents seemed surprised. The amount was significant, much more than a regular employee could easily pay. I hesitated and asked if this was really the amount my brother needed. Unfortunately, my fears were confirmed. We were also introduced to the same investment. My parents hesitated before admitting that they couldn't come up with that much money easily. I told them I couldn't help and tried to end the call, but they insisted, saying, "We're your real family. Help us out in times like these." It felt like too little too late. I replied, "Sorry, but I'm busy and I'm a stranger to you, right?" and hung up the phone. Later, somehow my parents and brother's family found out where I worked. They showed up at my company's office while I was in a business meeting. My secretary informed me, "There are guests here for you, President." I asked who they were, and she said, "They claim to be your family, ma'am." I was taken aback and quickly apologized to my business partner, excusing myself from the meeting. When I went to the reception area, I saw Maya, who was pregnant, along with my brother and my parents. My brother looked around the office with a smirk and said, "You're running a company, huh?" "Well, it's much smaller than where I work." I asked them, "Who are you?" I pretended not to recognize them and asked, "What's with the attitude?" My brother lost his temper and shouted, "What do you mean, what's with the attitude?" My mother stepped in and explained, "We talked about this before. We need your support. You're running a company, so you can help us out, right?" She was asking for money as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Yes, it's a crucial time for our family. Maya is about to give birth, and the child's health isn't great. We need to see a good doctor. Please, Emma. My father and Maya chimed in, acting like it was my duty to solve everyone's problems. Employees occasionally walked by the reception area, glancing over with concern. Wanting to get rid of them quickly, I said, "Please leave. You're causing a disturbance." My brother exploded with anger again, shouting, "We're a disturbance? We came all the way here, and that's how you talk to your family?" The employees passing by stopped and looked at them. My brother began making a scene, saying, "Do you all know this girl dropped out of middle school? She was a shut-in, a neat freak." He seemed intent on humiliating me if I didn't give him the money. To my surprise, the employees responded with words my brother didn't expect. "We know. Everyone knows the president's background. Many of our employees come from similar situations. Is there a problem?" My brother, who usually socialized only with highly educated and high-income people, seemed caught off guard and stammered, Instead of backing down, my father said, "What a pathetic company. Just a gathering of needs." My brother added, "Exactly. Companies that do business with a place like this can't be any good either." He yelled loudly. At that moment, the president of the company I was meeting with, who had been waiting in the reception room, came out. He must have heard the shouting. My brother's face went from blank to pale as he looked at the man and lowered his gaze. "What's wrong, Maya?" Maya asked, but it was too late. The president walked straight up to my brother and said, "You're the guy who always falls, Mr. Long, the division manager, right? We owe a lot to your company." It turned out that my brother's company was a client of ours. My brother was sweating profusely and stammered, I guess I'm not memorable since we're not a decent company." When the president threw his own words back at him, my brother froze. My father, mother, and Maya sensed the trouble and fell silent. I apologized to the president again, ignoring them. "I'm sorry for taking up your valuable time. I'll ask them to leave." The president replied, "Oh, are you sure? I have time today, so I don't mind waiting. You can prioritize talking with your family." I shook my head and said, "No, they're not my family." I glanced at my parents' and brother's family as I said this. They're complete strangers. After that, my parents' and brother's family were escorted out of the company. They left quietly, perhaps stunned by the encounter with the company president. Curious about how my job had been exposed, I looked into it and discovered that Maya was the cause. She had a friend who was well-informed about investment-related information and always kept an eye on such matters. This friend was a young woman in her 20s who was gaining recognition as a talented trader and company owner. Maya was surprised when she saw a photo of this woman in the media and realized that she was her husband's sister. Maya had heard about me being a middle school dropout and a neat freak. She told my brother and parents about this and suggested they ask me for money. Since I was busy during the day and didn't answer the phone and didn't call them back, they decided to come to my company. I had been treating them like strangers, so I decided to cut ties with them completely. However, I couldn't help but be curious about Maya and her involvement in my family's financial issues. It turned out that Maya's friend, who was involved in my parents' and brother's financial troubles, was actually Maya's ex-boyfriend. It seemed they were still involved, and the child Maya was expecting wasn't actually my brother's, but the child of this investor. No wonder my brother was devastated. Everything had been a lie. Additionally, Maya had been scamming money from several other men under the guidance of her ex-boyfriend. As a result, my brother and Maya ended up getting a divorce. Maya and her ex-boyfriend were taken into police custody, but the lost money wouldn't be recovered anytime soon. Following the incident at my company, my brother's position at work deteriorated. Despite being in his 20s, he was transferred to a low-status department and eventually resigned. He couldn't hold on to his job for long, likely due to the financial troubles and stress surrounding him. My father also faced trouble. He was witnessed losing his temper with a subcontractor at work, which led to an investigation into his work attitude and eventual firing. He had been expressing disdain for anyone who didn't graduate from a certain level of education, similar to the way he used to belittle me. Both my brother and father ended up losing their jobs. The former family, whose income had decreased, still contacts me, asking if we can live together again. I had them banned from entering my company's building, so they can't force their way in anymore. Despite everything that happened, they still try to cling to me, but my response remains the same. I don't know you. You're complete strangers to me. I have no intention of changing my stance in the future.